that noise?
Little groan, a little moan.
I heard that as well.
Are you there playing with the bear, Isaac?
Since 2012, I had been compelled to explore the reported hauntings at Sydney's old quarantine station at North Head. Oh, what's that?
It's a whole lot of intense energy right down here. It's this swirling going on. I just saw a little white light stream straight across behind Boo Buddy. Yes, it does. It does. Isaac, come on down the stairs. Come on, sweetheart. Come on.
I was all up for plumbing the depths of the so-called paranormal, but there was one subject that had pretty much been a no-go zone for me: the ghosts of children. We had skirted around the edges with Oz Paratech's playful approach to ghost hunting, trying to attract cheeky child entities like little Isaac. But the subject always turned deadly serious, fast.
Marker. Sweetheart, you talking about your grave?
Isaac. I had the opportunity to be at Isaac's gravesite many months ago when we were here during the day, and we were taken around to Isaac. There seemed to me to be a great sorrow around that point. To me, any child who is left on their own in spirit is very much a sad energy. No child wants to be left on their own. No child wants to feel that they are seeking or searching for love, whether they're alive or whether they're dead.
Hear that? Did you hear that?
Yes.
That was a knock.
Yes.
Rick.
That was the thing. Sorry. If I am around Isaac, I want to give him assurance that he's okay and that we remember him, because he's all alone up there on that hill now. There are bushes around the gravesite and not many people know that he's there. So you can imagine that a soul can get very, very lonely. And souls only exist if we have a connection with them, if we call them out, if we talk about them, if we mention their names. Otherwise, they will disappear. As Isaac is a soul here at Q Station, we need to keep mentioning him. We need to keep talking about him to keep him alive.
I just thought I heard a child's voice from over there. It sounded like a child.
From in the room?
Yeah, from within the room. I find I get more audio evidence than anything else. The voices that come across either on our spirit boxes that we use. We sometimes will get voices that will speak a whole sentence. One of my favourites was, "My mummy's sick." And that was heart-wrenching because it was a child that said that.
All I could feel was, where's my mummy, or where's wanting to hold my hand to bring me to his mum. I could feel the sensation as soon as I came to reception. And a little bit when we got into the bus, is I could feel a little boy. The little boy was giving me the name Jim or James. I don't know, but he was talking about his mum.
When Psychic Mary picked up on the presence of a little boy on site, I was really rattled. As a parent myself now, it tore at my heart to think of the little ones who had lost their parents and their lives here. It troubled me to think of their last moments. Were they frightened, being so alone?
Before I came here today, I was meeting with my supervisor. She used to be the chaplain at the Children's Hospital. And we were talking about angels one day, and she said the children see angels and they have wings. Children who are dying, who have had really serious surgery, who've spent ages in intensive care. One little boy, when she came to visit him and asked him, did he sleep well last night? And he said, except that the birds kept him awake. And another time, there were those birds again. And afterwards, of course, it became apparent that he'd had angels in his room with him. And he was too little to even know what angels were, but he knew about wings. And when he saw a picture of an angel in a picture book, that's my birds. My supervisor was saying just how common it is for their children to have these, what we might call paranormal experiences, but to them, they're very normal.
It also struck a raw nerve at a much deeper level, connected to my own childhood experiences. Hi Louise, you found me in the graveyard. Thank you for coming.
No worries.
So I approached Louise, a friend and filmmaker who had made documentaries about childhood trauma, to help me understand. I showed her the graveside of a young child with the same name Psychic Mary had told me about.
The little boy was giving me the name Jim or James.
And who was the same age as the little boy who had appeared in my childhood room. The inscription, he cometh forth like a flower, and he's cut down.
Yep.
Yeah. There's quite a few others on site. I've been looking around, so there's 2-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 21 months.
How does that make you feel?
Look, I've got toddlers, so it's heart-wrenching, isn't it? It's quite jarring. Everything was pointing in one direction now. Back to self. Back to my own childhood and my personal ghost. A boy child who visited my bedroom.
Can we talk about the boy in your room?
Sure. I was around 5, around that age. It was quite prominent for a few years. So
What do you remember about him? Can you tell us?
I would always see him run across the curtains. That's how I'd see him, run across the curtains. After a period of time, I started to notice a pattern. First, I would get an eerie feeling, like all of a sudden, it's like the air in the room goes still. And, you know, your hair starts to go up and you're like, okay, I'm feeling something is off. And you could be in the middle of anything and all of a sudden that feeling takes place. Then your nervousness kicks in, you start getting anxious, and then I'd either see him run across the curtains or sometimes I'd just hear him running. So sometimes it was visual and sometimes it was just the sound. But I would always feel it before I saw or heard anything. And at first, I was really scared. At first, I didn't really make sense of it. And funny enough, after a period of time, it's almost like we got to know each other's habits. I know that sounds really strange, but something that I remember very clearly is he did not like noise after 9 o'clock. So I don't know whether 9 o'clock was his bedtime, but he didn't like noise after it. If I had the radio on or whatever it was that I was doing and I was making noise, I would get a fright. I started to realise, okay, so I wouldn't play music after 9 o'clock and I started to be quiet after 9 o'clock. And it took a bit of time for us to kind of get this groove, I guess you would say. After a period of time, it actually got to a point where I found comfort in having him there. It's almost like you learn how to kind of live together. Really, everyone, I think at first just put it down to me having an imaginary friend, and I think that I did as well. The fear kind of came in from my parents because it was consistent. It wasn't just a one-off. It was something that was ongoing. They would hear me speaking to him in my room.
I had my first paranormal experience when I was around about 2 or 3. Staying at my grandparents' house, there was a entity or something that was under the bed. It would make the bed bounce and move around. It would tug the sheets off the bed, and it used to terrify me. And my parents, of course, thought it was just the imagination of a small child. But I actually saw one night this thing shoot out from underneath the bed and out through the window. I actually do believe it was some sort of land spirit or something like that. Through high school, I had some experiences. We stayed at an old YMCA in Newcastle on Church Street. I had my first experience of seeing something that I couldn't explain. I can only explain it like a staticky outline of what seemed to be three little old ladies sitting in a bay window. I had no idea what I was seeing. Nobody else could see it. I went home and told my grandmother about it. She used to live across the road from that particular house, and she told me that three sisters used to live in that house, and they would quite often sit in that bay window. So all of a sudden I thought, I must have some sort of ability or something that I actually got to see it. But I think as I got older, had children, I squashed it because I didn't understand it, and I think it was safer for me to put that in a box and just leave it till later. And now it's later.
And there's the matron's outfit. I can actually see her standing over there in this corner over here and looking out at the windows. She's not actually very happy with us being here. I started doing readings professionally many, many years ago, about 20, 30 years ago, when lots of people would come to my home and I was able to tell them, you know, of the events that were going to happen for them in the future. And they did eventuate, and sometimes to my surprise, I thought, oh my goodness, I didn't know how I knew that. When I was a very young girl, I was aware of things happening. I knew that things were going to happen. I didn't really grow up with fairies and ghosts and things. I was a very staunch Catholic, and I still am. I believe that there is a God or a spirit or something that guides us. Intuitiveness. This is a woman screaming.
Sometimes you can sense, like, I don't know if you can sense anything, but on that top step, it felt like someone was looking right at us. I could sense spirit in my room when I was 7. It was my first experience of a little boy who happened to be my cousin. I've had phenomena happen to me that it has been unbelievable, and I've had my husband sitting in the same room and I've been screaming that something's come through the mirror, and he's saying, I'm out of my, you know, like I've lost the plot, that I'm a fruitcake. What this lady told me through the mirror happened the next day, right? My baby stopped breathing the next day. She had a failed SIDS. And so he knew I was telling the truth because that's what she said, right? So to this day that, you know, he believed me. Some people can see it, some people can't. That's just a known fact in the psychic world, that not all of us have the empathy to be able to connect in.
So the first one I can remember is when I was only 3. My mum would often find me in my room talking to someone, a girl and a boy. I talked to them and played with them all the time. And my mum didn't know she's going to have another daughter, so I was the one telling my mum, Mom, I'm going to have baby sister soon. And my mum, you know, didn't know that. And then, yeah, a few months later, she found out she's going to have another daughter. My mum thinks, you know, the spirits actually told me before anyone else knew. So this one is actually my first experience with paranormal that I can remember. And then since I was young, I had premonition dreams. I would dream about something and the exact same thing would happen the next day or 2 days later. The best one I think was about Slovakian castle, which I often visited with my family. And one night I had a dream with castle burning down. And the next day it was actually on the news that the castle actually did burn down, which kind of scared me.
I would say that I was born being paranormal or not normal, because paranormal means not normal. I've thought a very long time, my whole life, about why I was such an emotionally fraught child. I remember my very first recollections of being a child as being in abject terror. I would see dark shadows, I would have things following me, I would have nightmares as a child. I couldn't sleep without the light on. I would scream all night long, and there was no real reason for this. That's the weird thing about it. Nothing that I can recollect would have led me to be in such fear of being alive.
My first recollection was about 5. I grew up in Sunbury. Now, Sunbury in those days was like an outback town. Now it's like a suburb of Melbourne. But my neighbour up the road, now we're talking back in those days, it was like 2 kilometres up the road, had unfortunately decided to play with his father's gun and shot himself in the head. I remember seeing him in my home, and I know this is a tacky analogy, but the movie The Sixth Sense, where you see the kid turn around with the hole in the back of his head, that's what I saw. I didn't understand what that was about, and I didn't understand that society says that I shouldn't be seeing something like that, but I was. Now, I never said anything to my family about it, because they are, well, majority of my family are staunch Salvation Army, so to say I'm seeing dead people I would have been ridiculed.
With my paranormal experience as a kid, I definitely pushed it down. It was definitely viewed as something that no one wanted to deal with, a scary incident. I come from a highly religious Catholic Italian family. Anything that suggests paranormal is usually related to something demonic or evil. They have that kind of perspective. So when I did come forward and talk about my paranormal experience, I instantaneously saw the adults around me go into fear mode. It was, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with the house? All of a sudden, the parents were getting the priest in to bless the house with the full holy water and the smoke and the whole shebang. Instantaneously, you think to yourself, okay, this is a bad thing. This is a bad thing. And I've got to be honest, you know, because it was shut down for so long, I questioned whether it actually ever happened. I questioned whether it was just the imagination of a child. My position has been for a long time that I believe that we do not know about or understand everything that surrounds us. Whether I believe that it is a haunting entity, I'm doubtful, but I can't rule out that so many of these experiences happen. So really, what this documentary is about for me is finding out what else could it be. Because I don't buy that it's just a haunting. There's something more here. I get that certain locations have a lot of stigma and trauma connected to them. It seems like that is something that a lot of these places have in common. It doesn't explain why some people experience it more prominently than others, though. So there's quite a few questions that are still left to be answered at this point. I turn to our team for their thoughts on this intriguing question. Your experiences in childhood, then in high school. Why do you think you were able to see them and the other people around you were not?
There could be a couple of reasons for that. I was around the age of 16 or 17. That's when your hormones are going through all these different sorts of changes. And quite often that is a time where some sort of ability will emerge. So it could have been something like that. Maybe it was the first time that the energy was strong enough for me to sense it. Maybe I was open to it for the first time, allowed myself to see, because we all knew this place was haunted. So I think as kids we were mucking around a little bit with can you see ghosts, what can you see, and I just allowed myself to look, and maybe the other people were a little too scared to look or didn't have the ability to see it.
And you said that you knew that this place was haunted, so do you think that it could have been that because you were told those stories, that you created that?
I don't think that what I saw was one of the stories, because I hadn't heard any stories apart from they had said to us, oh, this place is haunted. I remember going downstairs as well into the basement of that and seeing what looked like a classroom with desks, and there was a man, and when I say man, I mean without a pulse, who was living in the room next to it, who just seemed, I was terrified of that room. He was dark and evil, and it scared the living daylights out of me. Again, I found out the history afterwards, so I wasn't, I didn't have that information put into my mind to start with. I found out afterwards that it used to be a school for boys and the classroom was downstairs. So I like it when it's not put into your mind and you can come up with some sort of evidence afterwards that backs up what you've said.
Sometimes I'm blown away if I get a result with regard to a piece of information that comes to me and the client or the person that I'm working with says, yes, that's absolutely correct. And I will sit back and go, how did that happen? I don't know. I know it seemed to fall into my head. Now, whether it came from a place within my heart and it was an emotional thing that rose up, or whether it was something that happened to be a voice that came in, or whether it was something visual that appeared seemingly before my eyes that my eyes could register. Any of those, all of those, it just happens. And I think for many people who work in this realm, sometimes they can try too hard to try and work out why it happens, or the why of it, rather than just sitting with it and saying, that's okay.
I believe that everybody has these types of experiences, just in different forms. And I think that, you know, you can kind of look at things and go, okay, have you ever had a feeling in a parking lot all of a sudden that you need to get in your car and you need to just drive? Most people will say yes. Have you ever had a feeling that you've been walking down a road and you kind of think to yourself, you know what? Maybe I'll just turn this way, or maybe I should get on my phone. I know women experience this a lot more than men, you know, because we're hyper vigilant about safety. Have you ever just had this feeling that you need to call someone, you know, just to check in on them? Or have you ever had someone just pop up in your head for absolutely no reason? I believe these are all variations of the same thing. You know, so when everyone's sitting there kind of saying, oh, well, I've never had that type of experience, it might not be in the form of seeing something or hearing something, which most people have as well. But there is something about what surrounds us that we don't see that is unexplained to us at this present time. Even though we are scientifically breaking down barriers and stuff like that. But there's definitely more. There is more to what we see with our eyes and more to what we currently understand with our brain. And I think the answer is really with our intuition and our connection to everything around us, being it people, or being it nature, or being just the given moment. That's another thing that I notice is people that experience this stuff, they're usually quite connected in some way.
Do you notice in the people or even yourself who've had these kind of experiences, do you see any patterns there? Do you ask, have they been through a trauma, a car accident? If somebody's talking about hands to the throat or short of breath or being strangled, it could be an anxiety attack.
It could be. It could absolutely be. And that's the interesting thing. When the camera's rolling, they tell you their paranormal story. When the cameras are off and they're feeling more comfortable, they tell you about their life story. And that's what I find interesting. And I have noticed that is a connection, that a lot of people that have prominent experiences like this do have a more sensitive. They're more connected in a sense because they've been through things that have really forced them to have to be more sensitive.
I had a pretty rough childhood. My mother was in a severe car accident when I was 7. She came out of that never the same again. She would erupt violently, have mood swings. So she became a different person, almost. And yeah, my father had issues as well. So I was an only child. I was adopted. Fairly violent, emotional sort of abuse, I suppose, is the best way to put it.
Yes, I did experience a lot of trauma. I lost my parents at a very, very young age, and I was virtually destitute and put my brother into an orphanage. So I know what it's like to lose people, and I also know what it's like to be alone. So yes, I can empathise with a lot of people. I lost a child, so that was quite traumatic.
We had like things happening to us, so I would study for school and I would see like shadow person walk in front of the window because my desk was right in front of big window, so I could always see like shadow person walking. My mom could see the same thing, but she didn't say anything to me because I was still, you know, kind of young, so she didn't want to scare me. But I just kept seeing the same thing over and over again. So one day I came to my mom and I told her I'm seeing shadow person walking towards garage. That's when she told me she can see the same thing. We had pictures falling down from the walls. We had wall peeling off by itself, doors opening and closing on its own. So my mom one day called the priest to come and bless the house, and that's when we actually found out there was a suicide in our garage. A man, he hanged himself, and no one told us before we moved to the house. So we think it might have been what we saw, like the shadow of the man.
Did you have any type of trauma in your life?
We did, yes. When I was young, my mom was going through divorce with my father, and just, you know, it wasn't a very good time for any of us. We had some really bad experiences.
Was that around the same time you saw the shadow man?
Yeah. So we were actually told that every single family who moved into our house before us has separated. The parents have divorced. And we didn't believe it at first because we came there, you know, as a happy family, but eventually just the whole thing was, you know, kind of changing, the energy in the family. And then after a few years, my parents divorced.
Do you think that going through that trauma as a kid is what made you more sensitive as a human being?
That's a really good question. I never sort of put all of that together. I do believe that trauma can instigate or be a catalyst for change within a person. So possibly.
No trauma, no personal trauma to me. But my parents were both war survivors. My mother came through Auschwitz. My father was a prisoner of war on the German side. They both suffered incredible trauma and they saw the most horrendous things ever. Now, there is a little bit of work being done at the moment that says that if there is a huge trauma that occurs in a parent or a grandparent, and it is not dealt with, it remains so drastically in their DNA and imprinted that it can be passed on to the next generation. I kind of now believe that part of what I was going through was my parents' trauma from the war.
I don't mind sharing something as personal as this, but the biggest experience for me was I struggled with childhood abuse, and he literally, tried to take my own life. And I remember after I'd finished taking all those tablets, I saw the most brilliant white figure standing in the corner of my room, and I remember just thinking to myself, why? I don't want to do this. And it just, for me, it was the turning point for me that something was higher than me and higher than sort of what we're facing on this plane, if you want to call it that. And it was just that moment of just going, wow, like someone that wasn't physical cared that much about me to go, what the are you doing? And I remember just going, what am I doing? And I went running into my parents' room, and I was like going, I've done this, I don't want to do this, like help me. And I remember when I got to the hospital, my heartbeat was at 288 beats a minute and 300 is cardiac arrest. And from that moment on, I just went, nothing will ever let me get to that point. And whenever I go, you know what, I'm having a tough day today, I just remember that figure standing in the corner of my room, and it's what keeps me going.
I do believe there is comfort in that sense of connection that goes beyond life as we know it in this realm of time and space, this physical presence, particularly around the time of loss and death and grieving. I've heard a lot of stories about visitations or sensations that people have not just interpreted, but being absolutely certain. Unusual experiences, but that people value them so deeply, and they're really helpful in terms of people's recovery, return to normal life, being able to move forward in a renewed and positive sense.
I truly do believe there is something way more beyond death. And that's, I think, what keeps me wanting to investigate these places and help these people. And with the children of this site, I feel fiercely protective of the children simply because, to me, I know what they went through. I have that human connection with them, and I will still protect them energetically because they're them. They protect me when I'm on this site, and I have to give that back to them.
I was stunned by the common thread that linked so many of those who had shared this paranormal investigation with me. They were survivors of childhood trauma. Now, I was facing the truth, that I was too. Home wasn't all happy families for me. Worst of all was the utter sense of rejection and abandonment that left the deepest scar.
If you're living in a world as a child that's unpredictable, if you're living in a world where you're being hurt, harmed in some way, where you can't trust the adults around you to keep you safe and secure, then children can go to other places to try and seek that security and safety. In order to deal with those big feelings and to deal with the stress of those big feelings and the stress of the situation they might find themselves in, they may take to this idea of magical thinking. They might also start to see things that even exacerbate the feelings of fear and stress and worries that they have in their life. And that could be ghosts, it could be superheroes, it could be villainous sorts of people, and it could be spies. And certainly I've had children who have come into therapy and talked about these worlds they've created to somehow manage the world on the outside. So they create a world on the inside to better manage the world on the outside.
As a child, I certainly was the magical thinker and very connected to God. But spiritually torn apart when told in a sermon that being gay was the one thing God hated. I was an outcast and alone. But right now it was time to face my greatest fear. I was a little bit nervous to come back to this room. I'm glad that I have.
Bianca, I'm noticing that the curtains in the wind and leaves in the trees, there's a real sense of movement in here.
That change in atmosphere was the first sign that he's present. The very first point would be almost like the air would change, almost like it would be sucked out slightly, and the trees would rustle and the sound would slightly change. Then you would see the running. It can be a little bit of a shock when you first see it. So, you know, I've had other people that have heard him running and seen shadows, but I haven't had anyone pick up on that moment. So that was very interesting that you picked up on that. And funny enough, where you are sitting right now is exactly where he would usually be. That's his space.
Oh.
I'd been thinking a lot about what the little boy meant to me, and I think for me, I know now. That boy represented a part of me, and I really needed someone at that time. And I think that in some way I created what I needed. And he was a friend. I'm glad that I've come back because I feel like I had abandoned him. Now I realise that I'd actually abandoned a part of me. It's amazing what we do, especially as children, how much we deny who we are to make other people feel comfortable. That's what I did. I denied that side of myself. It's hard to think back that child felt so alone and so guarded and so separate from everything, and even separate from myself because I was different. Yeah. But now it's okay because I don't do that anymore. I don't have to hide anymore. And I love all of that representation, including that little boy in that room. Any parents out there that have children with imaginary friends, embrace that. And maybe pay a little bit of attention as well.
Your own kids, what do they mean to you?
Oh, they mean the world to me. Yeah. And they are very different. And that is probably one of the best things about them. So, yeah, we encourage that a lot.
Hey, happy Halloween!
Do you talk to them about things that are different in this world and acceptance of difference?
Funny enough, moving back into this house, we had the experience where in the lounge room, both of them all of a sudden jumped up on the couch and actually acknowledged a little boy. Obviously, that gave us a bit of a fright at first, but straight away I just went into, yes, there's other things around in this world, and if you can see them, then that's okay, you're safe, and you know, so we went straight into that conversation. So they're very aware that there's a lot of things that they get to discover as they're growing up, and everything's okay. You know, it's okay to experience things that are different and talk about it. They're not the first people to also encounter the little boy, so I don't know what he represents for each of those people, but I know what he represents for me. Come on, what's inside? The unicorn. Okay, Mummy?
Oh, cool.
Okay, so 2 unicorns. Who wants to make a wish on the magic rocks? Magical thinking. That really was the truth for any child. You know how we make up stories? And as parents, we can all share in the experience. Well, that's a fabulous horse. Looking back at my time at the quarantine station, it has been an incredible journey exploring the mysteries of this place and the mystery of life itself. And I had been blown away by spine-tingling,
Off my head and out through the door.
heart-stopping experiences shared with an amazing group of people. We'd gone hunting for ghosts, for proof of the connection between this space and another world. We'd reflected on lives of those who had passed or who had profound experiences here. And we'd looked inside ourselves for answers, for connections between who we are and what we experience. Was there ever a definitive answer to the mystery of ghosts and a space beyond the one we inhabit? Or are we always on a journey of discovery and self-discovery? What I felt now was peace, no longer afraid of this place, of my childhood ghost, or what cannot easily be explained, and a feeling and acceptance of ourselves as travellers in this space.